The small cafe sat on a busy corner downtown, its warm lights and rich coffee smell drawing in customers every morning. Isabella had worked there for almost 3 years, known by regulars for her quick wit, confident smile, and no-nonsense attitude. She took pride in her work, even on days when her feet ached from long shifts and demanding customers. Marco Alessandro first walked into the cafe nearly a month ago. Tall, sharp-dressed, and undeniably handsome, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone used to getting exactly what he wanted. Word around the neighborhood was that Marco ran one of the city's most powerful organizations, a mafia boss respected and feared in equal measure. Isabella, however, remained unimpressed by reputation or wealth. The first time Marco asked her to dinner, she had simply laughed politely and shaken her head. "I don't date customers," she had said simply, moving on to serve another table without waiting for his reaction. Marco, clearly unused to rejection, had raised an eyebrow but said nothing further that day. The second time, nearly 2 weeks later, he tried again, this time with more charm, offering an expensive dinner reservation at the city's finest restaurant. Isabella had smiled politely, but firmly declined once more. "I appreciate it, really," she said, placing his coffee down carefully. "But I'm not interested in being another name on your list, Mr. Alessandro." Marco had studied her carefully that day, something unreadable flickering behind his controlled expression, before simply nodding and letting the subject drop entirely. Today marked his 3rd visit since her last refusal. Isabella noticed him entering the cafe around mid-afternoon, taking his usual corner seat, his sharp eyes briefly scanning the room out of habit before settling into a relaxed posture. "Good afternoon, Mr. Alessandro." Isabella greeted him professionally, though a small smirk tugged at her lips. "Let me guess, coffee, black, no sugar?" Marco allowed himself a small, genuine smile. "You remember." "It's my job to remember," Isabella replied simply, though her tone carried a hint of playful challenge. As she turned to fetch his order, the cafe's front door suddenly burst open forcefully. Several armed men rushed inside, weapons drawn, shouting aggressively as terrified customers dropped to the floor in panic. "Where is he?" one of the intruders shouted, his eyes scanning the room until they landed directly on Marco. "There he is." Chaos erupted instantly. Customers screamed, diving for cover beneath tables, as Marco rose swiftly from his seat, his relaxed demeanor vanishing entirely, replaced by sharp, controlled alertness. Isabella froze momentarily, shock overtaking her senses, before years of quick instinct kicked in. She ducked behind the counter, pulling a young customer down safely beside her. "Everyone stay down," Marco commanded firmly, his voice carrying an authority Isabella had never heard from him before. He moved swiftly toward the cafe's entrance, slamming the heavy glass doors shut and quickly locking them, cutting off the intruder's immediate access and trapping himself, Isabella, and the remaining terrified customers safely inside. "What's happening?" Isabella demanded, her heart pounding wildly as she watched Marco calmly assess the dangerous situation unfolding just outside the locked doors. "Rival family," Marco said grimly, his eyes scanning the street outside carefully. "They've been looking for an opportunity to hit me directly. Looks like today was their chosen day." Isabella's mind raced, fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You locked us in here with them right outside." "I locked us in to protect everyone inside," Marco corrected firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If those doors stay open, they walk right in. Right now, they need to force entry, which buys us critical time." Isabella felt a strange mixture of fear and reluctant admiration at his swift, decisive actions. This was not the charming, confident man who casually asked her to dinner. This was someone entirely different, sharp, controlled, and clearly experienced in handling extreme danger. Outside, the intruders pounded angrily against the locked glass doors, shouting threats, though clearly hesitant to draw more attention by shattering the windows in broad daylight. Marco pulled out his phone quickly, dialing a number and speaking urgently in hushed, controlled tones, arranging backup swiftly and efficiently. "Stay down, stay calm," he instructed the frightened customers gently, his voice noticeably softer now as he addressed them directly. "Help is coming." Isabella watched him carefully from her position behind the counter, noticing the genuine concern in his eyes as he checked on each terrified customer individually, offering quiet reassurance despite the danger clearly still present outside. Minutes felt like hours as tense silence stretched between the Trap Cafe patrons and the frustrated intruders outside. Finally, distant sirens began echoing through the streets, growing steadily louder. The intruders outside exchanged tense glances before quickly retreating, disappearing into the busy city streets just as several police cars and unmarked vehicles arrived rapidly at the scene. Marco carefully unlocked the cafe doors, allowing relieved customers to rush out safely into the arms of arriving police officers and emergency responders. Isabella remained inside for a moment longer, her heart still pounding from the intensity of the situation. "Are you all right?" Marco asked, turning to face her directly, his usually guarded expression now openly concerned. "I think so," Isabella admitted, her voice slightly shaky. "That was not what I expected from a normal afternoon shift." Marco's lips curved into a small, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of my world today." Isabella studied him carefully, seeing him now in an entirely different light than before. "You locked those doors to protect everyone in here, including me." "Of course," Marco said simply, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Isabella found herself at a loss for words, the confident refusals she had given him twice before suddenly feeling less certain in her mind. Whatever she thought she knew about Marco Alessandro, today had proven there was clearly much more beneath the surface than reputation and rumor alone could explain. The cafe remained closed for the rest of the day as police finished their investigation, taking statements from shaken customers and reviewing security footage of the attempted attack. Isabella sat quietly at one of the corner tables, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, still processing everything that had happened. Marco stood nearby, speaking in low, controlled tones, with a police detective who seemed to know him personally. Isabella watched curiously, noticing the respectful, almost cautious way the officer treated him, despite Marco's clearly dangerous reputation. Once the investigation wrapped up and the cafe finally emptied of officers and customers, Marco approached Isabella's table, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "How are you holding up?" he asked, sitting down across from her. "Honestly, I'm not sure," Isabella admitted, wrapping her hands around a cup of tea someone had made for her. "An hour ago, I was just serving coffee. Now I've been in the middle of a Mafia shootout." Marco winced slightly at her words. "I truly am sorry you got caught up in this. It was never my intention to bring danger anywhere near you or this cafe." Isabella studied him carefully. "Why do rival gangs want to hurt you specifically?" Marco hesitated, clearly debating how much to reveal. "My family has controlled certain parts of this city for generations. Naturally, that creates enemies who want what we have." "That's a very vague, careful answer," Isabella observed, some of her usual sharp wit returning despite her shaken nerves. Marco allowed a small, tired smile. "Fair enough. The truth is complicated and dangerous for anyone who knows too much. I think I already know plenty, considering armed men just tried breaking into my workplace," Isabella pointed out dryly. Marco chuckled softly despite the tension of the day. "You have a point." They sat together for a while in comfortable, if unusual, silence. Isabella found herself studying Marco carefully, seeing him now completely differently than she had during his earlier, casual attempts at flirtation. "Can I ask you something honestly?" Isabella finally said. "Of course. Why do you keep coming back here? To this cafe, I mean. You could easily go anywhere in the city for coffee. Yet you keep returning here, despite my clearly turning you down twice already." Marco considered his answer carefully. "Honestly, at first, I was simply intrigued. Most people either fear me or try too hard to impress me. You did neither. You treated me exactly the same as any other customer, completely unimpressed by wealth or reputation." "And now?" Isabella pressed curiously. Marco's expression grew more serious, genuine vulnerability flickering behind his usually guarded eyes. "Now, I suppose, I simply enjoy your company, regardless of whether you ever agree to dinner." Isabella felt an unexpected warmth at his honesty, quickly reminding herself of the danger surrounding him, the chaos she had just witnessed firsthand. "That's a very different answer than I expected," she admitted. "Life has a way of shifting your priorities suddenly," Marco said quietly, his eyes meeting hers meaningfully. Before their conversation could continue further, one of Marco's men entered the cafe, his expression tense and serious. "Sir, we've identified the group responsible for today's attack," the man reported. "The Bianchi family. They've been growing bolder recently, trying to expand into territories we've controlled for years." Marco's relaxed demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by sharp focus. "Have we identified their next move?" "Not yet, sir. But considering they attacked in broad daylight, they're clearly growing desperate or overconfident." Marco nodded grimly, standing up from the table. "Increase security around the cafe immediately. I don't want another incident like today happening again." Isabella watched him transform instantly from the vulnerable, honest man she had just spoken with into the composed, authoritative boss she had heard rumors about. It was a jarring but fascinating transition to witness firsthand. "You're really serious about protecting this place," she observed once his man had left to carry out the orders. "I'm serious about protecting everyone connected to it," Marco corrected gently, his eyes briefly meeting hers, with unspoken meaning. Isabella felt her heart race slightly at his words, quickly reminding herself to stay cautious despite her growing curiosity about this complicated, dangerous man. "I should get home," she finally said, standing up from the table. "It's been an eventful day." Marco nodded understandingly. "Let me arrange a safe ride home for you. Given today's events, I'd feel better knowing you arrived safely." Isabella hesitated only briefly before agreeing, recognizing the genuine concern behind his offer rather than any manipulative intention. As she prepared to leave, Marco walked her toward the cafe's entrance personally. "Isabella," he said softly, using her first name for the first time since they'd met. She turned back to face him curiously. "Yes, thank you for staying calm today. Your quick thinking likely helped keep everyone safe." Isabella managed a small, genuine smile despite her exhaustion. "I suppose crisis situations bring out unexpected qualities in people." Marco studied her thoughtfully. "Indeed they do." As Isabella climbed into the car arranged for her safe transport home, she found herself reflecting deeply on the day's unexpected events. She had turned Marco down twice, confident in her decision, certain she understood exactly who he was and what he represented. Yet today had revealed layers to him she never anticipated: genuine vulnerability, real protectiveness, and honesty she hadn't expected from someone with his dangerous reputation. Meanwhile, unaware of Isabella's growing curiosity, Marco stood outside the cafe, watching her car disappear into the busy city traffic, his mind already turning over new, complicated feelings he hadn't expected to develop, especially not for someone who had firmly, confidently rejected him not once, but twice already. Little did either of them realize the true danger from the Bianchi family had only just begun. Over the following week, the cafe reopened under noticeably increased security. Isabella noticed unfamiliar men stationed quietly near the entrance and along the street outside, their presence subtle but unmistakable to anyone paying close attention. Marco visited almost daily now, though his demeanor had changed significantly from his earlier casual flirtation. Their conversations grew longer, more genuine, filled with real questions and honest answers rather than empty charm. "You're different lately," Isabella observed one afternoon, setting his usual black coffee down carefully. "Less confident, more thoughtful, I suppose." Marco smiled slightly, appreciating her direct honesty as always. "Perhaps confidence was easier when I had less to actually think about." Isabella raised an eyebrow curiously, sitting down briefly at his table during a quiet moment in her shift. "What changed?" Marco considered his answer carefully. "I suppose watching genuine danger threaten innocent people, including you, made me realize how easily things I take for granted could disappear." Isabella studied him thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," Marco replied, his guarded expression softening slightly in anticipation of her question. "How did someone like you end up running a criminal organization? You don't exactly fit the ruthless stereotype I expected." Marco's expression grew distant, memories clearly surfacing that he rarely discussed openly. My father built this empire through fear and violence. When he died, leadership fell to me, whether I wanted it or not. Did you want it? Isabella asked gently. Not entirely, Marco admitted honestly. But walking away wasn't really an option. Too many people depend on the stability our family provides, even if that stability comes through complicated, sometimes dangerous means. Isabella listened carefully, seeing genuine conflict behind his composed exterior. That sounds like a heavy burden to carry. It is, Marco said quietly, especially when new threats, like the Bianchi family, try forcing violent confrontations onto people who have nothing to do with our disputes. Like today, you mean? Or the cafe incident? Marco nodded grimly. Exactly like that. It's why I've increased security here. I won't risk something like that happening again. Isabella felt herself softening further toward him, despite her initial instincts warning her to remain cautious. You really do care about the people around you, don't you? Beyond just business interests. Marco met her eyes directly, sincerity evident in his gaze. More than I probably should, considering the dangers involved. Their conversation was interrupted by Marco's phone buzzing urgently. He glanced at the screen, his expression tensing immediately. I need to take this, he said apologetically, stepping away briefly to answer the call. Isabella watched him from a distance, noticing his controlled but clearly troubled expression as he listened intently to whoever was on the other end. When he returned moments later, his usual composed demeanor seemed slightly shaken. Everything all right? Isabella asked carefully. The Bianchi family attempted another move today, targeting one of my associates directly, Marco explained grimly. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt, but it's clear they're escalating their aggression. Isabella felt a familiar unease settle over her. Because of what happened here at the cafe. Marco hesitated before answering honestly. Partially, but mostly because they see any sign of hesitation from me as weakness they can exploit. Are you in danger? Isabella asked, surprised by her own genuine concern. I'm always in danger, Isabella, Marco admitted quietly. It's simply part of the life I lead. Isabella considered his words carefully, torn between her instinctive caution and her growing admiration for the complicated man before her. Doesn't that ever scare you? Every single day, Marco said honestly, surprising her with his vulnerability. But fear doesn't change the responsibilities I carry. Meanwhile, unknown to both of them, the Bianchi family continued their aggressive plans from a hidden location across the city. Salvatore Bianchi, the family's ruthless leader, reviewed reports from his men with calculating interest. Marco's been spending considerable time at a small cafe downtown. One of his men reported, there's a woman there he seems particularly protective of. Salvatore's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Interesting. Marco Alessandro, developing weaknesses? Find out everything about her. If she matters enough to him that he's increased security specifically for her sake, she could become extremely useful leverage against him. Understood, sir, the man replied, quickly leaving to gather further information. Salvatore smiled coldly, already forming new strategies in his calculating mind. Let's see exactly how far Marco is willing to go to protect his simple waitress. Back at the cafe, unaware of the Bianchi family's growing interest in her, Isabella continued her shift, her mind still processing the complicated feelings developing toward Marco despite her initial firm rejections. As closing time approached, Marco lingered nearby, clearly hesitant to leave despite his earlier urgent business call. Can I walk you home tonight? He asked finally, his tone genuine rather than pushy or presumptuous. Isabella studied him carefully, considering her answer. Just walking, Marco. Nothing more. Understood completely, Marco agreed respectfully, offering a small, appreciative smile. As they walked together through the quiet evening streets, comfortable silence settling between them, Isabella found herself unexpectedly relaxed in his presence, despite everything she now understood about the danger surrounding him. Thank you for tonight, she said as they reached her apartment building. For the honesty, I mean, not just the walk. Marco nodded sincerely. Thank you for listening without judgment. It's rare, considering everything you now know about my world. As Isabella turned to head inside, Marco called out gently, "Isabella?" She paused, looking back curiously. "Yes, for what it's worth," Marco said softly. "I'm genuinely grateful you turned me down those first 2 times." Isabella tilted her head, confused by his statement. "Why would you be grateful for rejection?" Marco's expression grew thoughtful, genuine sincerity evident in his voice. "Because it meant that whatever happens next between us, it will be built on something real, rather than empty flattery or the influence of my reputation." Isabella smiled softly at his words, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected to develop toward someone from such a dangerous, complicated world. Unbeknownst to either of them, Salvatore Bianchi's men had already begun quietly watching Isabella's apartment from a parked car down the street, marking the beginning of a dangerous new chapter neither Isabella nor Marco could yet anticipate. Over the following 2 weeks, Isabella and Marco's relationship deepened steadily, built carefully on honest conversation and mutual respect rather than pressure or expectation. Marco visited the cafe daily, sometimes staying for hours during quiet afternoons, sharing pieces of his complicated life while genuinely listening to hers in return. Isabella found herself looking forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit, even as she remained cautious about the dangerous world surrounding him. She had begun noticing small things. The way his expression softened whenever she laughed genuinely, the quiet respect he showed toward her co-workers, the careful way he always waited for her comfort before initiating anything more personal. One evening after her shift ended, Marco invited her to a quiet, private dinner at a small Italian restaurant across town, far from the public eye and prying reputation that usually followed him. "This feels different from before," Isabella observed as they settled into a private corner table. "More genuine, less performative." Marco smiled softly. "That's because it is different. I'm not trying to impress you anymore, Isabella. I'm simply enjoying your company." Throughout dinner, their conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from childhood memories to personal dreams and fears. Isabella learned more about Marco's difficult upbringing, his father's harsh expectations, the loss of his mother at a young age, the immense pressure of inheriting a criminal empire he never fully wanted. "I always promised myself I'd protect the people who matter to me, differently than my father ever did," Marco admitted quietly, even if that meant making difficult, sometimes dangerous choices. Isabella studied him carefully, genuine empathy evident in her expression. "That's a heavy responsibility to carry alone." "It has been," Marco agreed, "until recently." Isabella felt her heart race slightly at his implication, quickly reminding herself to stay grounded despite her growing emotional connection to him. As dinner concluded, Marco personally escorted her home again, their comfortable conversation continuing throughout the quiet walk. Neither noticed the black sedan parked discreetly across the street, watching their every move carefully. Inside the vehicle, 2 of Salvatore Bianchi's men observed intently, quickly relaying information back to their boss. "They're clearly involved romantically now," one reported through a hidden earpiece. "Marco's practically ignoring basic security protocols when he's with her." Salvatore's cold voice responded through the earpiece. "Perfect. Continue monitoring her routine closely. I want to know her schedule, her habits, everything. We'll strike when the timing benefits us most." Unaware of the danger quietly surrounding her, Isabella continued growing closer to Marco over the following days. Their relationship blossomed carefully, built on trust rather than fear, honesty rather than manipulation. One afternoon, as Isabella took a rare day off work, Marco invited her to visit a quiet, private garden behind one of his family's properties, a peaceful retreat away from the chaos of his usual world. "This place belonged to my mother," Marco explained, walking her through carefully maintained rows of flowers and greenery. "It's one of the few places that still feels genuinely peaceful to me." Isabella looked around admiringly. "It's beautiful, Marco. Thank you for sharing this with me." Marco turned to face her directly, vulnerability clear in his usually guarded expression. "Isabella, I need to be honest about something." "What is it?" Isabella asked, sensing his sudden seriousness. "Being close to me puts you at genuine risk," Marco admitted seriously. "The Bianchi family already knows about our relationship. If they decide to use you against me, The danger could become very real, very quickly. Isabella felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. Are you saying I should walk away? I'm saying you deserve to know the truth before deciding anything, Marco said honestly. I care about you deeply, Isabella, but I won't pretend this relationship comes without significant danger. Isabella considered his words seriously, weighing her own feelings against the clear risks involved. Marco, I turned you down twice already because I wasn't interested in becoming just another name associated with your reputation. But these past weeks, I've seen who you truly are beneath that reputation. Someone genuine, caring, and honest despite everything surrounding you. And now, Marco asked softly, searching her eyes carefully. Now, I think I'm willing to accept the risks that come with genuinely caring about you, Isabella said, her voice steady despite the fear underlying her decision. Marco's expression softened completely, genuine relief and happiness evident in his eyes. I promise to do everything possible to protect you, Isabella, no matter what danger arises. Their moment of connection was interrupted suddenly by Marco's phone buzzing urgently. He glanced at the screen, his expression tensing immediately. What is it? Isabella asked, noticing his sudden alertness. One of my men just spotted suspicious activity near your apartment, Marco said grimly. Unfamiliar vehicles, possible surveillance. Isabella's heart dropped. The Bianchi family? Likely, Marco confirmed, already moving quickly toward his car, gesturing for Isabella to follow closely. We need to get you somewhere safer immediately. As they drove swiftly through the city streets, Isabella felt the same familiar fear she had experienced during the cafe attack, now heightened by a deeper emotional investment in Marco's safety and her own. This is exactly what you warned me about, isn't it? Isabella said quietly, watching the city pass by anxiously. Yes, Marco admitted honestly. But I promise you, Isabella, I will protect you no matter what happens next. As they arrived at one of Marco's secure properties, additional guards quickly surrounding them protectively, Isabella realized clearly just how deeply she had become entangled in Marco's dangerous world, a world she had once firmly rejected, now fully embracing despite the very real risks involved. Meanwhile, from his private office across the city, Salvatore Bianchi smiled coldly upon receiving updated reports. Marco's moved the girl to one of his safe houses, his informant reported. He's clearly protecting her seriously now. Salvatore's eyes gleamed with dangerous anticipation. Then it's time we finally make our move. Isabella spent the following days at Marco's secure property, adjusting slowly to the increased security surrounding her, guards stationed at every entrance, careful protocols for even simple outings, constant awareness of potential danger lurking nearby. It was a stark contrast to the simple, predictable life she once knew. Marco visited frequently, splitting his time between managing the growing threat from the Bianchi family and ensuring Isabella remained comfortable despite the tense circumstances. I feel like I'm living in a completely different world now, Isabella admitted one evening, watching Marco review security reports at his desk. I know this isn't the life you signed up for, Marco said, glancing up with genuine concern. I wish I could offer you something simpler. I don't regret my choice, Marco, Isabella reassured him. I just need time to adjust to everything. Their conversation was interrupted by Marco's phone buzzing sharply. He answered quickly, his expression shifting to sharp focus as he listened intently. Understood. Increase perimeter security immediately, he said firmly before ending the call. What's happening? Isabella asked, noticing his heightened alertness. The Bianchi family has been spotted near the property's outer perimeter, Marco explained grimly. They're likely testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. Isabella felt anxiety tighten in her chest. Are we in immediate danger? Not yet, Marco reassured her, though his tone remained serious. But we need to stay alert. Despite increased precautions, tension continued mounting over the following 2 days. Marco grew increasingly protective, personally overseeing security arrangements and limiting Isabella's movements strictly within the property's secure boundaries. On the third evening, as Isabella prepared for bed, sudden chaos erupted outside her window. Shouting, gunfire, and the unmistakable sounds of a coordinated attack breaking out across the property. Marco burst into her room moments later, his expression urgent. We need to move now. They've breached the outer perimeter. Isabella's heart raced as Marco quickly guided her through emergency corridors, his men fighting fiercely to hold back the attacking forces. Despite Marco's careful planning, the Bianchi family's assault proved far more coordinated and aggressive than anticipated. As they reached a supposedly secure exit point, 3 armed men suddenly emerged, blocking their path directly. End of the road, Marco. One attacker sneered, his weapon raised confidently. Marco pushed Isabella protectively behind him. Let her go. This fight is between us. The attacker laughed coldly. Salvatore wants her alive. She's far too valuable as leverage now. Before Marco could react further, the men moved swiftly, overwhelming him through sheer numbers despite his skilled resistance. Isabella screamed as rough hands seized her, dragging her forcefully away, while Marco fought desperately against the remaining attackers. Isabella! Marco shouted furiously, struggling fiercely, but the assailants had already forced her into a waiting vehicle, speeding away into the chaotic night. Isabella was taken to an isolated location outside the city, her wrists bound tightly as she was pushed into a dimly lit room. Fear gripped her tightly as she realized the severity of her situation. Moments later, Salvatore Bianchi entered, his cold, calculating eyes studying her carefully. So you're the waitress who's captured Marco's heart, Salvatore said, circling her slowly. Interesting. He's risked considerable exposure protecting you. Let me go, Isabella demanded, trying to steady her trembling voice. Salvatore smiled coldly. Once Marco arrives to rescue you, as I'm certain he will, this conflict will finally be resolved permanently. Isabella's mind raced, quickly realizing Salvatore's true intentions. This kidnapping was merely bait, designed specifically to lure Marco into a vulnerable position for a final, decisive confrontation. Meanwhile, back at the compromised property, Marco regrouped swiftly with his remaining men, fury and determination blazing intensely behind his controlled exterior. We've identified Salvatore's likely holding location, one of Marco's trusted men reported, but security there will be extremely tight. I don't care about the risk, Marco stated firmly, his eyes burning fiercely. Isabella's safety is my absolute priority. His men, though clearly concerned about the danger involved, nodded resolutely, quickly organizing a precise and calculated rescue operation. Back at the isolated location, Isabella sat tensely, her mind racing desperately for any opportunity to help herself or delay Salvatore's plans. You seem unusually calm for someone in your situation, Salvatore observed, studying her closely. Panicking won't help me, Isabella replied steadily, refusing to give him satisfaction from her fear. Suddenly, the building's lights flickered ominously before going completely dark. Gunfire and shouting erupted immediately outside, chaos breaking out swiftly. Right on schedule, Salvatore said, a dangerous smile forming on his lips. Marco moved swiftly through the darkened building, methodically eliminating threats as he searched urgently for Isabella. He finally located the room where she was held captive, forcefully breaking through the door. Salvatore stood there, using Isabella as a human shield, his gun pressed firmly against her side. Let her go, Salvatore, Marco demanded, his voice dangerously calm despite the intense fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior. Salvatore laughed coldly. You've grown weak, Marco, risking everything for a simple waitress. She has nothing to do with our rivalry, Marco stated firmly, stepping closer deliberately. Release her, and we'll settle this directly, between ourselves. Isabella, sensing an opportunity, suddenly stomped hard on Salvatore's foot, simultaneously driving her elbows sharply into his ribs. Startled, Salvatore's grip loosened enough for Isabella to break free, stumbling quickly away from him. Now, Marco, she shouted urgently. Marco reacted instantly, lunging forward as Salvatore raised his weapon again in shock and anger. A single gunshot echoed sharply through the building, followed by tense silence. Salvatore collapsed heavily, clutching his shoulder in pain, disarmed and completely defeated. Marco stood over him, breathing heavily, weapon still raised, eyes blazing intensely. It's over, Salvatore, Marco stated coldly. You've lost. Marco's men quickly secured Salvatore and his defeated forces. Marco immediately turned to Isabella, relief flooding his expression as he carefully checked her for injuries. Are you hurt? He asked urgently. I'm okay, Marco. Isabella reassured him, though her voice trembled slightly. I'm okay. Overwhelmed by relief, Marco pulled her tightly into his arms, holding her closely as though fearing she might disappear if he loosened his grip even slightly. I thought I might lose you, he whispered against her hair. I couldn't bear that thought. Isabella held onto him just as fiercely, tears finally escaping now that immediate danger had passed. You came for me, she whispered. I knew you would. Always, Marco vowed firmly, pulling back slightly to look deeply into her eyes. Isabella, this danger has finally ended. Now, we can truly begin building something real together. In the days following Salvatore's defeat, the city slowly settled back into calm. His organization, left without strong leadership, quickly crumbled under pressure from both law enforcement and other criminal factions eager to claim his abandoned territory. Marco's world, for the first time in years, felt genuinely secure. Isabella spent her recovery at Marco's main residence, her body healing steadily from the ordeal, though her mind still occasionally replayed the frightening events of her kidnapping. Marco remained close by her side throughout her recovery, patient and attentive, a comforting presence during her most vulnerable moments. One quiet morning, as sunlight streamed gently through the bedroom window, Isabella woke to find Marco already awake, watching her with a soft, thoughtful expression. Good morning, she said, smiling sleepily. How long have you been awake? Long enough to appreciate how peaceful you look when you're not worrying about danger, Marco replied gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Isabella sat up slowly, studying him carefully. Marco, can we talk about what happens now that the danger has passed? Marco nodded seriously, sitting up beside her. Of course. I imagine you have questions. I do, Isabella admitted. Mostly, I want to know what kind of future you're imagining. For us, I mean. Marco considered his answer carefully, taking her hand gently in his. Isabella, when you first turned me down twice, I honestly believed it was simply a temporary setback, an obstacle I'd eventually overcome through persistence alone. And now? Isabella asked curiously. Now, I understand your rejection wasn't about persistence or charm at all. Marco continued thoughtfully. It was about genuine respect, real connection, rather than superficial attraction or reputation. That's exactly why what we have now means so much more to me. Isabella squeezed his hand gently, moved by his sincerity. I never expected to feel this way about someone in your position, Marco. Someone from such a dangerous, complicated world. I understand completely if that reality still concerns you, Marco said honestly. My life will never be entirely free from risk or complexity. Isabella smiled softly, her decision already clear in her mind. I've thought about this carefully, Marco. Yes, your world carries real danger, but it also carries genuine loyalty, honesty, and deep caring, qualities I've come to admire deeply in you. So what does that mean exactly? Marco asked, hope evident behind his cautious tone. It means, Isabella said, smiling warmly, that I'm ready to fully embrace whatever future we build together, danger included. Marco's expression softened completely, genuine happiness replacing his usual guarded composure. He leaned forward, gently pressing his forehead against hers. Isabella, that day at the cafe, when I locked those doors to protect everyone inside, I never imagined it would become the turning point that changed my entire life. He admitted quietly. You were the first person who ever saw beyond my reputation, straight into who I genuinely am. And I'm grateful every day that you gave me the chance to truly know you, Isabella whispered back, her voice filled with genuine emotion. Weeks later, life settled into a new, comfortable rhythm for both of them. Isabella returned occasionally to her old cafe job, though now accompanied by discreet, respectful security measures Marco insisted upon for her safety. Her regular customers noticed her genuine happiness, teasing her gently about the mysterious change in her demeanor. Marco, meanwhile, continued managing his responsibilities carefully, striving daily to maintain the honest respectful leadership style he had always aspired toward, now motivated even further by his desire to build a genuinely safe, stable future alongside Isabella. One evening, months after their harrowing ordeal, Marco returned to the cafe unexpectedly during Isabella's shift, carrying a simple bouquet of flowers. "Marco," Isabella said, surprised and pleased by his unexpected visit. "What's the occasion?" Marco smiled warmly, handing her the flowers. "No special occasion. I simply wanted to remind you how grateful I am that you once turned me down, not once, but twice." Isabella laughed softly, accepting the flowers with genuine affection. "And here I thought rejection was supposed to discourage someone." "With most people, perhaps," Marco replied gently. "But with you, it simply proved exactly how special you truly are." Isabella smiled, leaning gently into his embrace, grateful beyond measure for the unexpected journey that had led her directly into Marco's arms, dangerous, complicated, yet genuinely loving in ways she never anticipated. As she looked back on those early days, confidently turning down Marco's advances, unaware of the genuine man hidden beneath his reputation, Isabella realized clearly that sometimes the most meaningful connections arise unexpectedly, born not from persistence or pressure, but from patience, honesty, and mutual respect. And as she stood there, wrapped safely in Marco's arms, surrounded by the familiar warmth of the cafe where their story truly began, Isabella knew without doubt that she would make the exact same choice again, rejecting empty flattery twice, only to discover genuine, lasting love on the third, unexpected occasion.